Hey guys, what's
All
up? This
right.
is Carl, and I'm back with the Orthodox squad. Today, Demos finally came back from his holiday, so
What's up? What's up? It's been only 2 months.
triumphant return. And we've got Brother Augustine joining us today to talk about his books, and fascism and Freemasonry will be the topics that we go over. Brother Augustine, do you want to introduce yourself and tell the audience kind of what you do and what you like to talk about?
Sure. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate that. My name is Michael Witcoff. My Benedictine title is Brother Augustine. I've written a few books since becoming Orthodox. The two that most people know of are on the Masons and their lies, which is about why I left Freemasonry and why I think that Freemasonry is incompatible with Christianity. And then my newest book is Fascism Viewed from the Cross, which is an overview of fascism from an Orthodox Christian perspective. I grew up Jewish. I was an atheist most of my life, got into drugs, pickup, occultism, masonry, all that stuff. And then I've been baptized Orthodox for just over 5 years. And so I'm writing this stuff to hopefully help other people stay within certain boundaries and avoid certain errors that I have fallen into over time.
Quite the
So,
resume. But
yeah,
glory to
Yeah,
God, you found your place home eventually.
I sure
That's
did.
what it's all about.
Took a while, but yeah, glad to be here.
Better
well,
late than never.
I heard him mention Benedictine. What's that for those of us listening that have? I don't know what it is. So could you tell us?
It's Catholic.
So the Rocor and Antioch both have Western Rite vicariates within the Orthodox Church within the United States. And within the Antiochian Western Rite, there is a Benedictine monastery in Colorado called Our Lady in St. Lawrence, or Lady Minster, it's also called. And it's the only Western Rite Orthodox monastery in the country and one of only two in the world. So they follow the Western Rite services and the order of prayers throughout the day. And as an oblate of St. Benedict, I am attached to that monastery. I get to go there and visit every once in a while. My wife and I try to follow the rule of St. Benedict as well we can in our lay life outside the monastery, of course, because we're not monastics. Someday we might be, who knows? It's kind of a long-term plan. And so we just work within the framework that that monastery puts out. They have oblates all over the country, clergy and laity alike, married and monastic alike. And it's a really beautiful property up there. I think they have something like 600 acres out in the Colorado mountains. And so my title within that organization is Brother Augustine. Nowadays, they don't want us using our titles in public, but I got grandfathered in since I've been doing it this whole time and nobody told me not to. So Abbot Theodore has said I can just keep doing it. And he knows if he ever wants me to stop using that title, he can just tell me and I will.
Got it. That was comprehensive. I appreciate that. Could
Very
you?
interesting. I didn't know this. Not at
There's
all.
there's one other Western Rite Orthodox monastery in Germany.
In
And
church?
Abbot Theodore, who's the head of this program, just recently got back from visiting that monastery as well.
All right. Sounds
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Hmm. All right, Carl, go
So
ahead.
first things first, I wanted to ask, what does the church teach on these two topics, on fascism and Freemasonry? Can you be a fascist? Can you be a Freemason and be an Orthodox Christian? It's the first question.
I'm waiting
Bro.
for you to, there it is. I was waiting for you to get flack about pronouncing it that way again.
Yeah.
Here
All
it
right,
comes.
Fascism.
just a little note
Fascism.
for the viewers in Australia. They pronounce it fascist for some reason. Don't
No
know.
one's
We're the only
corrected me.
ones in
No
the
one's
world.
corrected me in my entire adult life. No
Fascist.
one's ever corrected me.
It's fascist, but whenever he says fascist, it's about fascism. All right, go ahead.
Fascism. So, brother, could you tell us, can you be Orthodox and support these ideologies?
So let's start with the easier one to answer of can you be Orthodox and a Freemason? And the answer is absolutely not. Every synod, every jurisdiction within Orthodoxy that has ever made a statement about it has explicitly said no. Or Freemasonry is not what it appears to be, just this harmless, philanthropic, charitable brotherhood. It is an ideology. It is a religion. It is a specifically anti-Christian ideology and religion. So the answer is no. Now, does that mean there are no Orthodox Freemasons? Unfortunately, no, it does not mean that. There are Orthodox Christians who are part of a Masonic lodge, unfortunately. And part of why I do what I do is to help make them aware of it so they can understand that they cannot serve two masters, because a lot of them don't realize they're incompatible. And also I wrote it as a way for priests to understand why the parishioners in their parish should not be part of this organization. In fact, the edition of the book that is currently available was written at the behest of a priest in New York who wrote to me saying that at one point in his ministry, almost every adult man in his parish was a Freemason. And this priest knew it was wrong, but he couldn't really articulate why. He hadn't spent a lot of time on it. And so I rewrote the book to kind of become more useful to priests who are in that position. We've also had patriarchs that were Freemasons. Patriarch Meletios Metaxicus, the guy who started Go Arch, was, I believe, a 33rd degree Mason, if the stories are true. He didn't hide his Masonic affiliation. He was featured in Masonic magazines in Greece at the time. And they should not be allowed within the structure of the hierarchy, but for one reason or another, he was able to make it to the top of the hierarchy. I believe he also started the new calendar, Patriarch Metaxicus. And so
I'm sure the Greek Church right now made a statement, or like an official synod decision, that you cannot be a Freemason, right, and be part of the Greek clergy.
Correct. The Church of Cyprus, the Church of Greece, ROCOR have all looked at this and said, you cannot be a Freemason and an Orthodox Christian. I do not believe that the OCA or Serbia or Antioch, at least in the United States, have said anything. I don't know what they've said. You know, Serbia in their own country, in their own language, I don't know. Or in the Middle East, in Arabic, I don't know.
I know for the Serbian church, it's not allowed completely.
Oh,
They've
okay.
spoken against it, and any other kinds of forms that are similar to that.
Okay,
That you're
well,
not allowed to be part of those communities, and they strictly forbade any kind of meetings with them, and that we should keep away from them at all costs, because it's even if we don't realize it, something along those lines went to statement, even if we don't realize it, they can still harm us spiritually from far away. So we have to be guarded at all times.
Well, thank God. I'm glad to hear that they made that statement. Part of my intention in writing this book was also to get official statements from the bishops, from the synods, from the hierarchies that have not said anything. So far, that has not been a successful venture. I don't know if any bishops have read the book. I don't think so. They certainly have not commented on it as a result of the book. A lot of clergy have the book, though. And if there are any clergy listening, all my books are free for clergy. So just email me and ask. By clergy, I mean deacons and priests and bishops. A lot of times I'll get readers or subdeacons saying, hey, do I count? Can I get a free copy? Let's just keep it to major clergy for that.
What about altar boys?
Well, once you're ordained a deacon, the altar boys can certainly get a free copy.
Okay, then I'm unlucky.
Yeah. As far as fascism goes, it's a lot more complicated because that word means different things in different countries and different times. Even within the same country, it has different connotations. Like within Italy, when fascism started, there was no racial aspect of it at all. In fact, there were a lot of Jews that were fascists in Italy, especially World War I veterans that were Jewish, funded fascism. Even some of them were black shirts that marched on Rome with Mussolini. Over time, however, that changed. And there were also a lot of Jewish anti-fascists in Italy. But over time, that changed after 1938, when Hitler's racial laws, the Nuremberg laws, basically went into effect in Italy and other countries too. They tried the same thing in Bulgaria, that the law for the defense of the nation, that the church viciously fought against the law for the defense of the nation in Bulgaria. And actually, the clergy in the Orthodox Church, the Saint Synod there, which universally spoke against Hitler and against fascism, is a large part of why there were no Bulgarian Jews deported to concentration camps. Hitler and his cronies wanted to deport the Jews from everywhere that they took over, from everywhere they occupied, to the concentration camps in Poland. And the church in Bulgaria is largely the main reason why that didn't happen, and some politicians that stood up for the Jews there. Jews still they did get deported from Thrace and Macedonia, which were under German occupation, but sort of given back to the Bulgarians. The Bulgarians were allowed to think that those regions were returned to their country, but really they were just administering it on Hitler's behalf. In Germany, fascism was obviously based largely on race and biological determinism. You will find quotes from Orthodox bishops defending Hitler, especially in the beginning, when he was still pretending to want to defend Christianity in his public speeches, and when he was seen as kind of the sword of God coming to avenge the church against Bolshevism, against atheism. Obviously, over time, Hitler's mask came off more and more. His anti-Christianity was hidden less and less. I mean, he writes in Mein Kampf, even early on, he calls Christianity a spiritual terror. He says it was the first spiritual terror that entered into a far freer ancient world. But at least in public, he would still give lip service to Christ, to the Lord, to God, to the Almighty. He would take photo shoots of him leaving a church, for example, because most Germans were Christian, right? They weren't Orthodox, they were Protestant, or they were Roman Catholic. But these were the people whose support he needed. He's not going to go talk about how much he hates Christ when he needs the support of the Christian people. But if you look at any of the diaries left by those close to him, left by Goebbels or Rosenberg or Christus Schrader, one of his secretaries, they all talk about how much he hated Christianity. Martin Bormann, who worked his way up to being Hitler's #2 guy, said Christianity and National Socialism are entirely incompatible. There's a really good book by Richard Weikart called Hitler's Religion that goes through all of these documents. And a lot of that I have in my book as well. But then in Romania, the fascist movement there was led by Orthodox Christians. It was led by Corneliu Cadreanu and then Horia Sima after him, and where they actually got the National Legionary State instituted for a couple of years until they were betrayed by General Ion Antonescu, and all the legionaries ended up in prison. So it's much more complicated to answer what is Orthodoxy's relationship with fascism, given the different expressions that it took place in different times. I think there are some things that we can agree are an overlap with fascism. For example, monarchy, one man being the leader. There are no Orthodox saints I'm aware of that have ever spoke out in support of democracy or have spoken against monarchy. So if we're going to, yeah, I've never found one. So if we're, St. John Kronstadt said that heaven is a kingdom and hell is a democracy. So if we're going to critique fascism, we cannot critique it from a place of authoritarian leadership. Michael Sisko, you guys might be familiar with his review of my book on his Substack, said, from a modernist point of view, I'm critiquing fascism for all the wrong reasons. Right. That was a good line by him. What we cannot agree with fascism on in the places where this was relevant is the racial stuff, that a man's value is based on his race. And this is something Hitler explicitly said. As a Völkisch man, I assess the value of a man based on his race. Obviously, we have to throw that away. Now, Orthodoxy, of course, recognizes difference in culture and ethnicity and nationality. No one's going to sit there and pretend that a Swede and an Aboriginal person have the exact same culture, right? We're not blind to the realities of the tribal nature of the world we live in, but we cannot say there's a difference in the value of those people, right? Someone could live in a hut in Australia or in the poorest part of Africa and not have running water. You can compare that person to some billionaire from the first world. Their value in the eyes of God is identical. They're created in the image and likeness of God. They can both become saints. We cannot assess the person's value based on where they live or what tribe they come from. And we cannot justify, like Hitler did, wanting to steal from the, quote, lesser people, the lesser beings, the Untermensch, in order to give their resources to the Übermenschen or the Aryans. So it's a complicated topic. That's why it took me, 330 pages to this is really just an introduction to the topic, really. I could have made it a 2,000-page book. That's a much deeper topic than the masonry.
Because I wanted to ask you, is the racial aspect the only difference that, is bad in fascism? Because I'm pretty sure there's a few more stuff, but that's probably in your book as well.
So there's a lot of differences. I mean, you have to be a good emperor, a good king is subject to the church, right? Yeah. Ideally, is a lay person who himself is subject to the church. There's a really good episode from history where the Emperor Theodosius kind of orders this mass reprisal, this very violent reprisal, and St. Ambrose of Milan penances the emperor, makes him wait in the nave in his civilian clothing. He can't commune until St. Ambrose is satisfied with his penance. That is not a level of humility that you see from the fascist leaders. I mean, Hitler had no authority above him whatsoever. Cadreanu did love the church, especially at the end of his life when he was rotting in prison before they killed him. If you read his prison notes, he really starts to love Christ and especially St. Paul and the epistles of St. Paul. and starts to reflect on how he spent his time fighting men, when in reality he should have spent more time in spiritual warfare. Mussolini obviously did not consider himself subject to anything. He understood the importance of Catholicism for the Italian people, but you cannot be an Orthodox leader without being subject to the church, period. The king is not above the church. The king is not above the bishops. Throwing everyone in concentration camps to let them work until they die, I don't think is a very Orthodox approach to dealing with our enemies. And of course, there's a whole wide range of opinions on what happened there and what the truth is of all that. But if you actually read through it, I mean, Hitler's plan was quite overtly deport all the Jews to camps, and then no one thought they were coming home from that. You know, no one thought it was going to be a summer vacation. You'll have people saying no one was killed in the camps, that all the people that died there died of typhus and other diseases and starvation. I think that's a pretty immature perspective on what was going on. On the other hand, you have stories online about how they would throw Jews in a cage that had a bear and an eagle in it, and the bear would maul the Jews and the eagle would pick his bones clean. Frankly, that sounds ridiculous to me. I don't think either of those extremes is likely to be accurate. I think what is likely accurate is that they were sent there with the understanding they were never going to be coming back. They were going to die there, whether they were killed because they were old and sick and couldn't work, or because they were a political prisoner of some kind, or they were just going to be worked until they died. I mean, it's kind of a distinction without a difference at that point, if you're sending people there to die either way, in my opinion. And I've heard all the arguments on both sides. That's just what I've arrived at my current understanding, and that could maybe change as time goes on. I don't know. As to how governments should be run, how a country should be run in terms of the economic system and how classes and unions should interact, the church really has not made a statement on this. You know, the church's understanding is that a country should be run to rein in the worst impulses of sin in the population, stop sin from running wild and ruining a country, and also for the benefit of the people, right, to help them thrive and succeed and have money and food. But it hasn't really gone into depth dogmatizing any specific structure of corporatism or free market. It really seeks to work with the existing structure. Orthodoxy tends to want to work with the government, whatever it looks like, to try and do the best job it can to shepherd the souls of the people that live there. So we can't look at a specific economic system and say, well, Orthodoxy is completely against this mode of economic being. Now, we can, of course, say communism and free market capitalism are both atheistic structures that are not ideal. But in both cases, the church tries to work with what they're given to do the best for people.
Exactly. We can even see back in the days during like Ottoman times, the church still worked with the Ottomans. Even after all the oppressions, they were still willing to work and try to find compromises to help the faithful as best as they can.
That's why you have that quote: better the Pope's mitre, the Sultan's turban than the Pope's mitre. Why? Because with the Sultan, it was working. You can compromise, but you can never compromise the faith. And with the papacy, that's what the compromise had to be. It had to be you compromise the faith, otherwise we're not helping you. With the Ottomans, it was more like physical status or money, whatever it was. It's not that they force our faith to change. That's why that was said. Just clearing that out for those watching. Yeah, it's been thrown around so many times.
Well, they did try to, law the Greek language because we were not allowed to speak that anymore.
Exactly, there was no Greek schooling. It wasn't publicly spoken.
Yeah,
but it was still allowed so the church basically saved the Greek language.
So I just want to mention, like,
purpose.
They weren't saints, but I want to your opinion on distributism, because I think that's a Catholic structure, right? Did the Orthodox Church say anything about that, or not at all?
So when people ask me what economic system I think is best, first, I'm not an economist. I don't know the ins and outs of all these systems, but I tend to agree with Ivan Ilyin, who was a Russian Orthodox political philosopher. He wrote an essay called On Forms of Sovereignty, where he makes the argument that there is no such thing as a best system, because the best system is relative to the people you're talking about, in the climate they live in, with the geography they have, with the history they have, with their level of intelligence and industriousness. I mean, a system that works really well in one part of the world for one group of people could be a complete disaster for another group of people in another part of the world. So I think it really depends on
I agree.
the people you're dealing with.
Yes.
So,
So
something.
all right. Do you know something about the fascists called metaxas, or do you not know anything about it?
I don't. Who are
You
they?
should look him up, because that was our leader in Greece during the war, the Second World War, and before that as well. And he was monarcho-fascist, so he supported the king, but was also the leader of the country. And the Orthodox Church actually worked together with him a lot.
I'm going to
Yes.
look into that. So my book, I focused on Mussolini, Hitler, and Cadrianu, and then I've begun exploring other Orthodox countries and how they responded to the war. That's why I read this book on Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be my next one. What was the guy's name? I'm gonna Google it.
Metaxas. You know the Greek wine called metaxa?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
just
his
add an
wine?
S.
Oh, okay. I think that's what we
So-
use for communion in my church, if I'm not mistaken.
So yeah,
Ioannis
definitely look him up,
Metaxas?
because yes, Metaxas. Ioannis Metaxas.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we
He's in
say
my
Metaxas,
Wikipedia.
but you know, because he was the 4th of August regime, and their official religion was the Greek Orthodox Church, and they worked together a lot. So we should definitely look into that. And he was definitely
Okay.
fascist.
I will.
Yeah.
Maybe in a future edition of the book. I mean, I'm gonna have to take a break from writing for a while because my life's getting very busy. But in a future edition of the book, I want to include more countries. Maybe make it a 500-600 page book, going through all the countries that were Orthodox and see how they responded. Because I think they all responded a little bit differently. That's why it's hard to say what is our position towards fascism. I mean, you're telling me that in Greece, the fascists supported the church and vice versa. In Bulgaria, the church was very against fascism. So it really depends, I think, what fascism looks like in that country, and
Yeah.
what the clergy were like there.
Agreed very much.
I
Go
saw
ahead,
that
Carl.
your book got taken down, the one on the Freemasons, and you were remaking the cover because of that.
Yeah.
Do you know why that was?
Yeah, so the book's had the same cover since it was published in May of 2018. And now when I try to advertise it on Amazon, they said it's too violent, but they never cared before. So that painting of Saint Michael the Archangel holding a sword over Satan, even though it's a cartoon, like it's a drawing, they say it's too violent because it shows a character wielding a weapon against another character. So I don't know if this is a new rule they put into place or what, but I just had the cover redesigned so that I can advertise the book again, basically. They still let me sell the book on Amazon. I just can't advertise it, which makes no sense to me. Excuse me.
That's weird.
It is weird. I mean, they take a big cut of my book sales no matter what. The more I advertise and sell, the more money Amazon makes. You'd think they would want me to advertise. And they're saying your book is, the cover is too inappropriate to advertise, but not too inappropriate to sell. That makes no sense to me. But I have no say over that. So I'm just going to run the new
Communism,
cover.
all right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when
Maybe
there are
it's a
much more.
Freemason guy that's just like,
Maybe.
nah.
Well, if the new cover, if they kick back the new cover and say that that's not appropriate to sell, then I'll know something weird is going on, because the new cover has no violence on it at all.
So when's that coming out?
So I just ordered a proof copy for myself of the new cover because I want to have a look at what it looks like before I publish it. That should be here in a couple weeks. They take forever to get proof copies to you, which is weird.
Yeah.
So hopefully within a couple weeks, I'll have a new cover. I've also asked Father Turbo Qualls if he has time to give me feedback on the book itself, because he wanted a copy of the book. Because I would like to do a new edition in coordination with the new cover. They might not happen at the same time, but I'd love his feedback if he gets a chance to read it. Hint, hint, Father Turbo, if you're watching this.
He might be.
Would
He was on this
appreciated.
show before, so.
Okay, well, maybe he's listening. I know he's a very busy guy, but I really trust his discernment. So if he has feedback for me, I'll throw it into the next edition.
All right.
He actually has both of these books.
Do Bogomils have, just jump straight into this, do Bogomils and Manichaeans, because these are all Gnostic things, like, are the Freemasons linked to any of these older church groups that kind of infiltrate the church from within? Because that's what Freemasonry does. It usually
Illuminati.
members can be part of both things at the same time. So is there any link that you talked about in your book or that you're aware of?
It really depends what Mason you ask. I mean, the story they tell you is that the Masons were a stonemasons guild that has existed since time immemorial, and they're the lineage of those who built Solomon's temple and blah blah blah. The spiritual lineage is Kabbalah. So there are aspects of Gnosticism in it. Obviously, it is a Gnostic religion, Freemasonry is. Albert Pike, in his book on Morals and Dogma, which is kind of the big Bible of the Scottish Rite, for lack of a better phrase, even though they will often deny that he has any influence when they're trying to get away from him. He, I think, does talk about the Bogomils and the Cathars and other ancient Gnostic groups, the Valentinians, the Basilidians. He mentions these guys. He even mentions Arius as an example of someone who really, really understood what Christianity was truly about. So Pike was certainly well versed in Gnosticism and Gnostic movements. But as to the actual ideology of Freemasonry, I would say it's Kabbalah, which is not quite what those Gnostics believed in. It's closer to Platonism. It's basically Plato with a yarmulke, is how I've described it in the past. It's a Jewish version of Platonism. And that really is the underlying philosophy of the fraternity. Though most Masons don't know that, but it's because they're not paying attention.
So is it organized Lucifer? Is it organized Satanism? Is Freemasonry organized Satanism? Because you hear so many conspiracies.
You're lagging.
Am I lagging for you, brother?
Carl, you're lagging.
A little bit.
Yeah. So I think you got the question though.
Yeah, I would call it organized Luciferianism. And I would just draw a distinction between Luciferianism and Satanism, as saying Luciferianism seeks to exalt man as God, and Satanism is actually a worship of Satan. But of course, different Luciferians and Satanists will disagree with that. That's just how I kind of frame it to myself. Because Satanists will also say that they're atheists seeking to just exalt themselves, but some of them are theistic Satanists, the ones that believe in the devil as a being and worship that being. I don't think most Freemasons do that. I think they just seek to do what all the ancient Gnostics did, of elevate themselves into the rank of gods by freeing their souls from this prison of matter. But there's a lot of guys there that are just like Protestants too. They don't impose an ideology on you, but that doesn't mean that there isn't one there. And I've never met a 33rd degree Mason that I would say is a dogmatic Christian or a doctrinal Christian. They might call themselves that, but they don't mean by that word what we would mean by that word.
I feel like a lot of Catholics are, for some reason.
There are Catholics in Masonry, and they're not supposed to be there either. I initiated one as an entered apprentice when I was a Mason, a guy who was part of the Knights of Columbus, but they're not supposed to be there.
Okay.
Either. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what's a common conspiracy theory? What do people usually say about the Masons that is just bunk straight off the bat? Because people say all sorts of things about them.
Well, the checkered floor?
No, that's real. The
real.
checkered floor is real. Yeah, they like that kind of black and white dualistic imagery. They're a big fan of that sort of thing. People say the Masons run everything. I don't think the organization runs anything, but I think they've seeded their ideology into the culture to such a degree that the fraternity itself almost isn't relevant in terms of trying to influence things, is my opinion, because I think their ideas are just mainstream now. That said, I do think that the fraternity is kind of like a feeder system for the elite in terms of they're looking for people that are going to go places. You know, they're looking for people that are going to be successful in politics or in business. And what circles you get brought into once you're a Mason depends on what they think you have the potential for. So there's a lot of things in Masonry that most Masons don't know are there because they've never gotten that tap on the shoulder and said, hey, come check this out. We think you'd be a good fit for this.
All right.
Also,
Anyway,
No.
listen, you know what's ironic? They called us Freemason before, but I came to realize that we don't know anything. So, you know how we have on the background, like we have the pillars on the sides, and like in our intro, like you saw a sound wall, like like soundproof wall and stuff, and it looked like checkers. So a dude thought we were part of the Freemasons, but
Yeah,
I just thought it looked cool.
All over Facebook.
Yeah. Because I thought it just looked cool because it was 2 Greek pillars, so I thought, oh, that's cool. But anyways, I want to get more into the secrets of the Freemasons. Like, I know the elite are part of it. Like, most people that are part of it have a lot of money, or is that not true?
no, I wouldn't say that's true.
No,
I didn't have a lot of money,
I see.
It probably depends how old someone is too. Like obviously, if you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s, you're going to have more money. If you've lived intelligently for the most part, than you will if you're 20 or 30. But no, I don't think most of the people there were wealthy.
Oh,
At least that
So,
I saw.
so the
do they
elite
like?
basically is independent of the Freemasons, or does it work through it in some way? That's the question.
I think a lot of elites are part of groups like the Masons or Skull and Bones, but it's not like everyone there is part of the elite. Absolutely not. It's kind of like what I was saying. It's a feeder system or a screening system. Like if you are on a certain path, they'll probably groom you down that path. But otherwise, you're just there to pay dues and fill seats and be on the membership rolls.
All right. Is
Mhm.
there like a single leader of the Freemasons, like
Yeah,
a world
Satan.
leader?
Yeah, his name is Satan.
Oh,
In terms of human leadership, they say
like their
no.
pope.
They say no. I don't know if that's true. What they tell you is that at least in the United States, every state has its own Grand Lodge that is autonomous. It's kind of like autocephalous Orthodox churches.
Yeah.
They say there's no one in charge of all this. I don't know if that's true or if at some point you get welcomed into the circle where they tell you, yeah, we were just kidding about that. Here's what's really going on. So I can't give an accurate answer to that. And
Is
in
it they?
some countries, it's not divided by state. Some
Yeah.
countries, the royal members of the royal family are all in charge of the lodge officially, but at least in our country, they say that's not the case.
I see.
And
Is it?
you mentioned earlier there is like a grade system. So what was the highest grade you were aware of?
33rd in the Scottish Rite, Knight
Mhm.
Templar in the York Rite. And then I was part of a group that's not public that I got the shoulder tap to go into, an occult group within Masonry. And there were 7 grades in that group. I don't remember what the top grade was called, Philosophus or Philosophicus. I don't know. It was all named after different like grades of magic and magicians and stuff. I don't remember what the top grade of that was called though, because I was only there. I think I only got to the 3rd grade of that or something. I wasn't part of the group for very long before I ended up leaving Masonry. But I was a 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite, and I was in the commandery of the Knights Templar in the York Rite, but I was not an officer in the York Rite. I was an officer in the Scottish Rite, sort of, if you want to call it an officer. I was an actor for one of the degrees, and then I read the script. I was a prompter for one of the degrees, where basically I had a microphone with the script of the degree in front of me, and if one of the actors or one of the guys conferring the degree or doing the ritual forgot his lines, I would say it into the microphone. He would hear it in his ear. So maybe that doesn't really count as an officer. I was an officer in the Blue Lodge, which is the first 3 degrees. What was I when I left? I was either the senior steward or the chaplain or the marshal. It's been a long time since I've thought about this stuff. I was either senior steward and I was acting as the marshal and chaplain in the degrees. I don't remember if I was officially the marshal or chaplain. I think I was officially still the senior steward at that point, because you kind of start doing the task above you before you get to it. And then I was an officer in the Royal Arch and in the Cryptic Council, which are the grades with the groups below the Commandery of Knights Templar in the York Rite. And then I was an officer in what we called Allied Masonic degrees, which was a very informal group where you just kind of give lectures to the other guys and hang out. And there wasn't too much to do.
That's Game of Thrones levels of titles right there.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's new titles and jewels and offices, as many as your heart can desire.
That you
Man.
all remember that. I would never. I would never
I'm
remember.
I'm no more confused than before.
That's how they get
In
you.
my head, it sounds
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
were part of
So-
5 different groups.
Well, there are so many different groups within it. They all have their own ritual system, their own
Right.
titles, their own officers. I mean, what most people think of as Masonry is probably just the main 3 degrees: Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. That's the Blue Lodge. That's the main heart of Masonry, so they say. And the other groups are all appendant bodies or things that are optional that you can join if you want, once you're a Master Mason.
So is it dangerous for you to talk about this at all?
I don't know. I mean,
don't
it could be. I thought they were really going to go after me. Turned out some of them didn't even know I left. I had one of them call me a couple of years ago to help him with some political thing he was doing.
Yeah.
He didn't realize I'd left. I think guys come and go all the time and they don't really care that much. But being out here speaking against it, I'm sure there is some level of danger involved. I don't know what it is. I don't think I'm influential enough. You're not going to see me on TV anytime soon talking about it. I'm not allowed, like, I'm not going to be on the Daily Wire. As soon as I start talking about Jews and Masonry, I'm not going to be on some mainstream conservative thing. So it's not like my influence is large in their eyes, but I don't know. I hope not. Please keep me in your prayers that I'll be protected from any kind of retribution they might be planning.
So I wonder about the rituals. I'm pretty sure they do rituals, right? So
oh yeah.
Does it involve very gory stuff, or is it very innocent?
No, it's very good. The penalties for each degree, where you say the penalty for if you violate the oath is extremely gruesome. It always involves either your tongue being ripped out, or your stomach being cut open, or your head being cracked open so the sun can fry your brains. It's all really gruesome stuff. Like every degree has a penalty like that. And in the Mormon world, what they call their endowment ceremony, which is the main ritual of Mormonism, since it's mostly just the Masonic ritual with some extra trappings, they used to include these penalties in Mormonism, but they've sanitized it and taken them out. They still have the Masonic square and compass on their temple garments. The Mormons, they have their underwear that they wear, the white underwear, still has Masonic imagery on it, but they no longer have the penalties involved.
Were you aware of these things actually happened?
I have not been made aware of it actually happening. There was a case in the 1800s, a guy named Captain William Morgan, who revealed the secrets of Masonry and was never seen or heard from again. No one
was
really
that the
knows
guy from the Run?
A different Captain Morgan. Captain Morgan. And Jack the Ripper and his story, there's a lot of Masonic phraseology and imagery. There was a Johnny Depp movie called From Hell that really is more overt about the Masonic connections. But I've never heard of a person actually suffering these tortures. I don't know if it's just symbolic. I don't know if they really do it, or they used to do it and they don't anymore. I really don't know. I really hope not.
But nothing like nothing sexual or,
no,
with children or anything like gruesome like that.
Nothing that I ever saw, no. I've heard those rumors that to join the Masons, you have to like kill a family member or sacrifice a child. That's all nonsense. That's not real.
I guess it is. So
I don't know what they do in the 33rd degree, but I can't imagine that they would require that for them either. Because I know 33rd degree Masons, none of them have done something like that to my knowledge.
At least they haven't told you. But
at least they haven't told me. That's right. I have a hard time believing those guys would do something like that.
All right.
And how do you level up? How do you kind of go up the ranks?
But it's more than just a glorified.
So hold on. So I'm getting two questions here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
So what was your question?
How do you go
the ranks? How do you work up the ranks?
Yeah, you said you got to the 32nd level and you weren't there for that long, right? So
the Scottish Rite. Sorry, you want to finish your question? Because I think I get what you're saying. So in the southern jurisdiction of the United States, which is what I was part of, because I was in the southern jurisdiction, in the Scottish Rite, you get your 32nd degree on the first day. That is not the case in Europe, and it was not always the case in America. So in the United States, you only see 5 degrees. You see, I'm going to probably butcher this. I'm trying to remember. You see the 4th degree, I think the 14th, either the 14th or the 18th, and then the 25th, and then the 30th and the 32nd. I think those were the 5 they show you. I have seen all of them except for one, because I went to Guthrie, Oklahoma once upon a time for this 3-day event where you see all of the rituals in the Scottish Rite. They do that, I think, twice a year. But in the normal lodge, you work your way up from, in the first 3 degrees, you have to memorize, you have to learn how to decipher these coded passages. They have this little book they give you with a cipher. So the oath of the degree is written there in code, in symbols. And you have to work with a mentor to memorize it, understand what the symbols mean. And then you basically repeat that in front of everyone. And if you do a pretty good job, they say, okay, you're proficient in whatever degree, you can go on to the next one. Other than that, just service to the lodge. If you're on the officer line, it rotates every year. You go a step up the officer line every year, or if someone drops out, you go up faster. That's how I became senior steward. I was what's called the Tyler. And then I became the junior steward because the junior steward dropped out, or someone dropped out in the line. And then I got officially put in place as the senior steward. And then I think I was doing marshal and chaplain during some degrees, but that's when I left, if I remember right. I believe that was correct. But typically just time and effort is the short answer of how you progress up the ranks. As for 33rd degree, you cannot ask to be part of it or you will never get it. It has to be something they offer you. So they're very careful about who gets it. I think you have to have been there for a long time in most cases. Manly P. Hall was given an honorary 33rd degree, but it's like a way that fraternity honors you and reward for your lifetime commitment to Masonry is they'll give you the 33rd degree. And I think you can only get that in Washington, D.C. in the Masonic Temple there. If I'm remembering correctly, that's where Albert Pike's body is. And you have to be flown out there by the Scottish Rite to get that degree. The other ones you don't need to go to DC to do.
Thank you.
Dear Lord,
Dimos, what were you going to say? You were going to ask something, but I interrupted you.
Who, me?
Yeah. No,
I just said, Dear Lord,
only one
protect us,
Demos.
This is all. This sounds very like satanic, but so it's definitely more than just a glorified boys' club.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I was involved in 4 different groups. I was there all the time, multiple times a week. You know, if I was dating a girl, I would bring her there. I would have friends come to watch the ceremony where I became senior steward because that was open to the public. A lot of it was boring meetings, to be totally honest with you. The rituals I enjoyed, but the stated meeting, the monthly business meeting, was a total waste of time. But that's a bigger statement about meetings. I personally have never been to a meeting that could not have been sent to me as an email. So I'm just very anti-meeting in general. I found them very boring. Where you just go over the minutes of the last month's meeting. Oh, at X o'clock, so-and-so did this. I don't care. Why are we even talking about it? But I had a good time there. Like I really did. I liked the guys there for the most part. It taught me a lot about responsibility, and it introduced a love of ritual to me that I can now have fulfilled in Orthodoxy. You know, Masonry is liturgical. There are deacons. Every degree is scripted. It's the same words in the same order every time. So there's something about liturgy that I think resonates with the human soul, and that was my introduction to it. Of course, growing up Jewish, that's liturgical as well in the synagogue, but I had so completely rejected my spiritual upbringing that I hadn't been to one of those in probably since my bar mitzvah, since I was 13 years old. So it was kind of it showed me that there's something here. I like the hierarchy. You know, I like that there's a master of the lodge that's kind of the master of ceremonies, and everyone serves at his whim, his pleasure, which now is fulfilled in Orthodoxy. The bishop is the monarch, right? And the priest is a smaller monarch of the parish. So there was a lot about Masonry that I liked that has transferred to my love of Orthodoxy. In fact, the first time I heard anything from the New Testament was in Masonry because they repeat lines from the scripture during the perambulation where the candidate's walking around the altar in circles. The chaplain is speaking scripture. So it got me interested in, you know, that sort of thing. There's pictures of St. John the Evangelist on the wall, St. John the Evangelist, St. John the Baptist, the Holy Saints John, as Masonry calls them. So there's a lot of biblical imagery there that I've been able to follow up on now that I'm a Christian. But they're all distorting these things for their own purpose. Like it's not leading you to Christ. Masonry does not lead a man to Christ.
Well, like you eventually.
Well, yeah, but accidentally. It wasn't their plan.
By leaving, of
course.
Exactly. Yeah.
But was there a lot of personal rivalry? These questions are all like my own interest, out of my own interest.
No,
like,
totally.
was there a lot of personal rivalry and all kinds of stuff like that in the lodges?
I only had a rivalry with one guy. Other than that, I got along with everybody. And that guy was a weirdo, man. There was some stuff going on. I won't say more.
I guess there's always this one weirdo everywhere, right? So.
I mean, anytime you get a bunch of guys in an organization where there's titles and offices, there's going to be some degree of politics, right? That's just part of it. There was rivalry. So when I was in Masonry, there was this group of Filipino Masons. They're kind of like a schismatic group. We would consider them a schismatic group that was kind of like a criminal organization, frankly. And they were sort of infiltrating the lodges and taking over the officer positions to such a degree that the grand, what's the guy called? Not the Grand Mason, the Grand Master of the California lodges, I believe it was Mel Stein at the time. He had to write a letter to all the lodges in California saying, do not associate with this group of people. They are not real Masons. They are schismatics, for lack of a better phrase. If you know that someone joining is part of it, don't let them in, because they would come in a big group and take over a whole lodge. So there was some like inter-organizational rivalry, more than I would say interpersonal rivalry, at least from what I experienced. But I try to get along with people. You know, I'm cool with everyone until they're not cool with me. And not everyone is like that. Some people just want to go compete with others. And I like competing with people, but in like a friendly way. So I only had that one issue because that guy, and he was like mean to me first. So it's not like I did something wrong by him.
I have another question. What's the reasoning why so many people are joining the Freemasons? And what do they give the people that they are staying there?
I think it's just interesting, curiosity. You know, there's a lot of philosophical content to it. If you're into the occult, there's just an endless amount of stuff you can learn there about the Zohar or the Kabbalah. It's kind of like a beginner's occult school is what I would call it. Like it. So there are some groups within Masonry that actually do ceremonial magic. And of course, that's what the rituals are. They're ceremonial magic, but they're disguised as something else, except for in certain groups. So if you're into the occult, there's a lot of content there that guys that are not occultists don't understand they're a part of. You know, Masonry, I think the institution kind of gets a kick out of showing people something they don't understand and telling them it's about something else. In fact, Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma explicitly says this. He says, we mislead candidates who deserve only to be misled, making them think they understand the symbols whose true meaning is reserved only for the elect, right? Only for the wise or the occultists, the adepts. Pike is open about this. And it's funny because the people who don't get it will be the first ones to tell you that Pike has no authority in Masonry. He's just one guy, just sharing his opinion. They're exactly the people Pike was talking about, the people that don't get it. So I think there's that aspect for occultists. There's also networking for people that are in business or politics, of course. There is brotherhood to it. So for example, I went to Vegas once upon a time back when I was in the Masons, and I was just in the pool at the hotel, and another guy in the pool said something that made me think maybe he's a Mason. So I asked him the question that you use to identify a Mason. You say, are you a traveling man? And if they say from west to east, they're saying, yes, I am also a Freemason. So he gave that answer. I knew he was a Mason. We started talking about Masonry. And then he took me out for lunch and bought me this great steak. And he was like my buddy for the week that I was at this hotel. You know, he was a established guy, give me business advice and whatnot. So there is that aspect where wherever you go in the world, you're going to find someone who's part of your brotherhood, right? Of course, we as Orthodox Christians have that, but most people don't have anything like that. So there are things that are appealing about Masonry and its structure. They give a lot of charity. That's appealing. Of course, most of the charity is to other Masons. The idea there is that they'll take care of you if you get sick or something, take care of your family. So there is incentives to join. And of course, it's cool, right, to have the titles and the jewels, and I'm an officer and whatnot. There's power there. So anytime you have something like that, there's going to be a draw, right, for men. There's going to be a draw to that power, to that brotherhood. So I think that's a big part of it too.
But when you're speaking of power, what kind of power do those ranks even give? Are there
Just
like
within
more
the
like
lodge.
status symbols, like in the okay?
Yeah, power over, you know, who might get to be elevated as an officer. There's a lot of inner politicking like that. Like you get to influence how far someone could go. So it's not like real power, like outside of the lodge. At least it wasn't for me.
Basically, you could go to the lower ranks, hey, fetch me water or something like that.
I mean, yeah, in theory you could. You would serve whatever the guys above you needed. Like when I was the steward, I would have to go do the grocery shopping for the lodge and then like bring the food there and everything. And of course they paid me back for it, but that was part of my duties. So yeah, I was the chore guy. Just like at work, you know, when I was brand new at work, I work in the trades. You know, I was the guy, hey, run to the truck and get me something. So it was kind of like that. I was the run to the truck and get me something guy. Go get the drill, go get the hole saw, go get whatever. You get the bad jobs the lower you are on the hierarchy.
So is there a link, because we've talked about fascism and we've talked about Freemasonry, is there a link between the two in any way? Would you?
I think that's a good last question.
Yeah.
That's Demos's way of saying, let's wrap this up. I got places to be. And
No. It's just we try to do it around an hour.
oh, gotcha. Okay. I have not come across any explicit connection because Masons in different countries have supported different political systems. The Masons in the Enlightenment supported the French Revolution. There were also Masons that were monarchists that supported the conservative regime in different countries. In England, obviously, I think it's the Prince is the highest ranking Mason. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's correct. Just by virtue of being nobility, he's the highest ranking Mason. He's obviously going to side with the royalist party, so to speak, and he's not going to side with the anti-monarchists that are out there. Prince Harry might, because he's become completely Americanized and married that American actress, but I don't think Prince Charles would side with an anti-monarchy, anti-nobility, anti-royalty party. So you can't really say Masonry has a political ideology because it changes. It's whatever serves the agenda best in any given time and place, if that makes sense. In Germany, Hitler totally suppressed the Freemasons. He was very against it. Most of the fascists that I've looked at have been against Masonry, but I'm sure there were some Masons that supported fascism too. The ones that were against communism the most would probably have supported the fascists because that's the choice it came down to in a lot of these places, right? It's like, well, if you're either with the communists or you're against them, and if you're against them, you're probably a fascist. Of course, in Germany, they had other circles that were against communists that were not fascists, the conservative revolution circle, but they were not the ones that won, right? It was the fascists that got control of the country. And at that point, it was a choice. You're either with the fascists or you're with the communists.
Mm-hmm. So, to conclude, you cannot be Orthodox and a fascist. I mean, it's possible, but
I think it would really depend on what sort of fascism you're talking about.
Because fascism is not like black and white like Freemasonry, basically.
Right. I think I don't think you can be Orthodox and a National Socialist because that's a specifically biological ideology, a racial ideology.
Definitely.
Well, with the way the world's going, maybe one day you'll be able to change your race and join.
Yeah, you can identify as whatever you want. That's true. But we have saints that came out of the legionary movement in Romania, guys that were part of the Iron Guard. They were fascists. Saint Valeriu Gafencu, who is not formally canonized, but it doesn't matter because he's a saint. There's a great book called The Saint of the Prisons by Monk Moisey that Father Turbo recommended to me, actually. It's one of my favorite Orthodox books, The Saint of the Prisons. Father George Calciu came out of that movement. Father Roman Braga came out of that movement. Some people consider Cadriano a saint. I'll leave that up to God. I don't know. He certainly tried to protect the church and do good things for the church. And a lot of people in the church supported him. Up to 25% of clergy in Romania supported the Iron Guard movement. So that's why I think we have to be careful when we say, can you be Orthodox and a fascist? It really depends.
I think it's funny because Demos and Milos were just having a bit of a discussion about Codriano before the podcast anyways. So
yes,
he's an interesting guy.
So
it's very interesting and very controversial.
So I had a lot about him to say because he did a lot of things I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I'll be completely blunt. I really dislike the guy.
Okay. A lot of people do.
Yeah. Because of some of the things he did in his early life as well. I mean, a lot of the bad habits he had started in his early life, like in the university, with the story where he started the movement and went around beating up other students who were Jewish or of Romani descent, and there were like so many things incompatible with Orthodoxy. So I always have like a bitter taste when somebody sees him like as a saint. But
I think
it's always for the church to decide.
If you read his notes from prison, I think it'll show you a different, more mature, more Christian side of him. Once he understood he was never going to leave, and his family was in other prisons, and his mom was at home alone, and the police bugging her. Yeah, I think his heart really softened from being in prison and harmed.
I think a big part probably was also of that isolation in his prison cell.
Yeah.
Then going more into himself and more searching for God.
Totally.
That made him more see the light in the end.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Anyway.
I think from an unbiased perspective, I don't know anything about the guy, but if you look at St. Moses the Black's history before he became a Christian, or you look at St. Augustine's history, you have to, it might be incompatible with Christ at the start. People change throughout their lifetime. That's the thing about us as people. So I think I want to read more about him now, to be honest with you, just to find out.
You can start with the book Fascism Viewed from the Cross, now available on Amazon.
Thank you.
He's got another book, the Freemason book. What was the title of that one?
That one is called On the Masons and Their Lies.
Like On the Jews and Their Lies by Martin Luther, but then the Freemason version.
I may or may not have stolen the title from him.
But all right, yeah.
We'll link both of the books down below. Otherwise, is there any book recommendations that you recommend on the topic other than those two that you kind of drew inspiration from? And any last things you want to say?
On that particular topic, no. But for your American audience, I will shill a book called Glorified in America that just came out about St. Alexis Toth and St. Tikhon and St. Innocent and St. Herman. It is a phenomenal book. It's like Lives of the American Saints. Beautiful. This book, Glorified in America. It is really edifying. It will teach you the history of your faith in your own country. And even though I didn't write it and has nothing to do with these topics, I highly recommend everyone pick up a copy of Glorified in America.
It was needed, to be honest, something like that.
Totally.
Thank you very much, Michael, aka Brother Augustine, for being here. We really appreciate it. We've seen each other for a long time on Twitter. Now we see each other on the podcast. Maybe in real life one day, who knows, on a conference or something. But yeah, thank you very much. I think the other guys appreciate it too. Right, guys?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Great
say thank you, Milos.
Thank you.
Milos is undecided as to whether this was a good interview or not.
No, it was good.
I think he's just tired because it's like 12:30 for us. But thank you very much. And
of course.
for the what?
Oh, just
for the viewers, thank you. For the viewers, don't become a Freemason.
Don't become
Stay with God. God bless. And say hi to Carl on Twitter. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.